The most expensive day in Warner Brothers production history was ticking away in complete silence. $20 million worth of film equipment, crew members, and Hollywood's biggest leading man sat idle on stage 16, while a global superstar remained locked inside her trailer, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Whitney Houston, the woman with the most powerful voice in music, couldn't find the strength to walk 30 feet to a movie camera. And Kevin Costner, fresh off his Best Director Oscar win for Dances with Wolves, was about to make a decision that would either save the film or destroy his career. But before we understand what happened on that catastrophic first day of filming, we need to go back 6 months earlier, to the moment when Kevin Costner made the most controversial casting decision in Hollywood history. The Bodyguard had been a passion project for Kevin since 1976, when the script was originally written for Steve McQueen and Diana Ross. For 15 years, the project had been stuck in development hell, with studios rejecting it repeatedly. Now, in 1992, Kevin had enough power in Hollywood to finally make the film happen, but only if he made the safe choice for the female lead. Studio executives had a list of established actresses they wanted for the role of Rachel Marin, the superstar singer who needs protection from a stalker. Michelle Pfeiffer, Meg Ryan, Sharon Stone, all proven box office draws with years of acting experience. Safe bets, bankable stars. But Kevin Costner had a different vision, one that was about to put everything at risk. He wanted someone who wasn't an actress at all. He wanted Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston in 1992 was at the absolute peak of her musical career. Her voice had dominated radio for nearly a decade, with 7 consecutive #1 singles and over 50 million albums sold worldwide. She was royalty in the music industry, beloved by millions, and possessed a talent so extraordinary that even veteran performers spoke of her with reverence. But she had never acted in a film, never taken an acting class, never stood in front of a movie camera. The very idea terrified her. When Kevin first approached Whitney about the role, her immediate response was a firm, almost panicked refusal. This was documented in a conversation with her longtime vocal coach, Gary Katona, who remembered Whitney's exact words that day in May 1992. She told Kevin she wasn't an actress, that she would embarrass herself and ruin his movie. Gary recalled how she paced her recording studio for hours after that first meeting, listing all the reasons why accepting the role would be a catastrophic mistake. She knew every word of criticism the media would throw at her, overstepping her boundaries, thinking she could do everything, setting herself up for public humiliation. But Kevin saw something in Whitney that she couldn't see in herself. During their first meeting at her New Jersey home, he watched her interact with her family, saw how she commanded a room without trying, noticed how her presence could shift from vulnerable to powerful in seconds. This wasn't about acting technique, Kevin believed. This was about authentic star power, the kind that couldn't be taught in any acting class. Rachel Marin needed to be a genuine superstar, not someone pretending to be one. And there was only one person on Earth who could bring that authenticity to the role. 3 weeks before filming was scheduled to begin, Whitney still hadn't committed to the project. Studio executives were in a state of barely controlled panic. Sets were being built, crew members were being hired, and millions of dollars were being spent, all based on Kevin's insistence that Whitney would eventually say yes. But she hadn't. Warner Brothers president Terry Semel called an emergency meeting with Kevin, delivering an ultimatum that threatened to end the entire production. Either get Whitney to commit in writing by Monday, or recast with an experienced actress who could start immediately. Kevin spent that entire weekend trying to reach Whitney, leaving messages that went unreturned. By Sunday evening, he was out of options and nearly out of time. That's when he decided to drive to Whitney's hotel in Los Angeles unannounced, showing up at her door at 11 o'clock at night with a bottle of wine and a copy of the script covered in his handwritten notes. Whitney's assistant, Robin Crawford, later described the scene that unfolded. Kevin sat across from Whitney in her suite, and for 2 hours, he didn't talk about the movie. He talked about fear. Kevin shared his own stories of failure and self-doubt, moments that never made it into his public biography. He told Whitney about bombing his first screen test so badly that the casting director told him he should consider another profession. He described the panic attacks he experienced before winning his Oscar, convinced he was about to be exposed as a fraud in front of the entire industry. And then he said something that would echo in Whitney's mind for the rest of her life. Fear doesn't mean you're not ready. It means you're about to do something important. When Whitney finally arrived on the Warner Brothers lot for the first day of filming in November 1992, she was 45 minutes late and visibly shaking. The call time had been 6 in the morning for hair and makeup, with the first scene scheduled to shoot at 9. It was now 9:30, and Whitney was still in her trailer with the door locked from the inside. On stage 16, 70 crew members, 3 cameras, and Kevin Costner waited in increasingly uncomfortable silence. The scene they were supposed to shoot that day was deceptively simple. Rachel Marin arriving at a press conference, confident and in control, every inch the superstar. It required no dialogue, just Whitney walking through a crowd and taking her seat with absolute authority. For an experienced actress, it would have been a gentle warm-up, an easy first day designed to build confidence. For Whitney, it felt impossible. Inside her trailer, Whitney stared at her reflection in the mirror and saw nothing but inadequacy. Her hair and makeup were flawless, styled by the best artists in Hollywood. Her costume, a stunning cream-colored suit, fit perfectly. But none of that mattered because Whitney was convinced that the moment she stepped in front of that camera, everyone would see the truth. She was a singer pretending to be an actress, and this entire $20 million production was about to collapse because of her fraud. Kevin received word that Whitney was having a crisis in her trailer at 9:45. His assistant director, a veteran named Frank Marshall, immediately suggested they shoot around her, filming other scenes while Whitney pulled herself together. This was standard protocol in Hollywood when a lead actor was having difficulties. But Kevin made a decision that shocked his entire crew. He told everyone to take a break, and then he walked across the lot to Whitney's trailer alone. What happened next became the stuff of Hollywood legend, though most of the details remained private for years. Kevin didn't knock on the trailer door demanding that Whitney come out. He didn't send studio executives to threaten her contract. He didn't try to force the door open or talk her through the crisis from outside. Instead, Kevin Costner sat down on the steps of Whitney's trailer and waited. For 45 minutes, Kevin sat on those aluminum steps while the most expensive film production in Warner Brothers history ground to a complete halt. Crew members whispered nervously. Studio executives made frantic phone calls. The head of production calculated how many thousands of dollars were being lost with each passing minute. But Kevin didn't move. He just sat there, occasionally looking at his watch, sometimes studying his script, but mostly just being present outside that locked door. Inside the trailer, Whitney could hear the silence. She knew production had stopped. She knew people were waiting. And she knew that Kevin was right outside her door, though she couldn't understand why he wasn't angry or demanding. That silence, that patience, that refusal to give up on her, broke through Whitney's panic in a way that no amount of encouragement could have achieved. If he believed in her enough to wait, maybe there was something worth believing in. At 10:37 in the morning, Whitney unlocked her trailer door. She didn't open it, just unlocked it and sat back down at her makeup mirror, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. Kevin waited 30 seconds before opening the door slowly, giving Whitney the option to lock it again if she wanted. She didn't. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and sat down on the small couch across from her. For the first 15 minutes, neither of them spoke. Kevin didn't ask what was wrong or tell her everything would be fine. He just sat there, letting Whitney process whatever she needed to process. Finally, when Whitney's tears had slowed enough for her to speak, she said the words that Kevin had been expecting since the moment she'd agreed to do the film. "I can't do this. I'm not an actress. I'm going to ruin your movie." Kevin's response wasn't what Whitney expected. He didn't contradict her or offer empty reassurance. Instead, he told her a story that he'd never shared publicly before. When he was cast in his first major film role, Kevin had experienced a complete breakdown on set, so severe that production shut down for 3 days while he recovered. He'd been convinced he was the wrong choice, that the director had made a terrible mistake, that everyone was going to realize he had no idea what he was doing. The only thing that got him through, Kevin said, was understanding that the fear meant he cared enough to want to get it right. Then Kevin did something that changed Whitney's entire perspective. He asked her to forget about acting for a moment and just think about being Rachel Marin. How would Rachel walk into that press conference? How would she hold her body? What would her face show the world? Whitney, still crying but now listening intently, began to describe Rachel without realizing she was describing herself. Confident, powerful, in control. but underneath it all, scared of being exposed as not good enough. Kevin let Whitney sit with that realization for a moment before speaking again. That's the character. That's who Rachel is. You don't need to pretend to be something you're not. You just need to be yourself in these circumstances. And Whitney, you're more than good enough for that. You're the only person on earth who can do it authentically. At 11:15, Whitney and Kevin emerged from the trailer together. The crew, who had been on break for nearly 2 hours, quickly assembled on set, unsure what to expect. Whitney's makeup had been touched up, though her eyes were still slightly red from crying. She stood at her starting position, and for the first time in her life, waited for someone to call action on a film set. Kevin had made one significant change to the shooting plan. Instead of using 3 cameras to capture the scene from multiple angles, he asked his cinematographer to use just one, positioned at Whitney's eye level as she walked. This wasn't about creating a perfect shot, Kevin explained to his crew. This was about making Whitney feel like she was walking toward one person she trusted, not a wall of cameras judging her performance. The first take was a disaster. Whitney walked too fast, her shoulders tense, her face frozen in an expression that looked more terrified than confident. Kevin called cut gently, walked over to Whitney, and without saying a word, placed both hands on her shoulders and squeezed gently. It was a small gesture, but it became a ritual between them. Before every take, Kevin would give Whitney that small shoulder squeeze, a silent reminder that he was there and that she wasn't alone. The second take was better. Whitney's walk slowed, her shoulders relaxed slightly. But there was still something missing, an authentic confidence that the scene required. Kevin could see Whitney thinking too hard, trying to remember how to act instead of just being. That's when he made another unconventional decision. He asked his sound engineer to play one of Whitney's own songs through the speakers on set, not for the scene, just to help her find her rhythm. As the opening notes of I Wanna Dance with Somebody filled the sound stage, something extraordinary happened. Whitney's entire body language changed. This was her element, moving to music, finding power in rhythm. She began walking to the beat, and suddenly Rachel Marin wasn't a character Whitney was trying to play. She was a singer who happened to be walking to a press conference, which was exactly what Rachel would be. Kevin called action for the 3rd time, and what happened next left the entire crew speechless. Whitney walked through that scene with such natural authority, such genuine star power, that you could feel the energy shift on set. She wasn't acting like a superstar. She was being one, which was precisely what the scene needed. When Kevin called cut, there was a moment of stunned silence before the entire crew erupted in spontaneous applause. It was a breach of set protocol, but no one cared. They had just witnessed something special. The moment when Whitney Houston transformed from a terrified singer into a film actress. That first successful take didn't solve all of Whitney's insecurities, but it proved that she was capable of doing this. Over the next several weeks of filming, Whitney and Kevin developed a working relationship that went far beyond the typical dynamic between co-stars. Kevin became not just her scene partner, but her acting coach, her confidence builder, and her protector from the intense pressure of the production. Before every scene, Kevin maintained the ritual of the shoulder squeeze, sometimes adding a few quiet words of encouragement that only Whitney could hear. You've got this. Just be yourself. The crew learned to recognize the pattern. If Whitney looked nervous before a take, Kevin would be there immediately, not hovering or coddling, but present and steady. His faith in her became the foundation that allowed her to build faith in herself. There were still difficult moments. A particularly challenging dialogue scene in week 3 left Whitney so frustrated she walked off set in tears, convinced she was ruining the entire film. But Kevin followed her, and instead of talking her through the technical aspects of the scene, he asked her about the last time she'd had her heart broken. Whitney, caught off guard by the personal question, began sharing a story from her past. As she talked about the pain and vulnerability of that experience, Kevin quietly signaled his assistant director to reset the cameras. When Whitney finished her story, emotionally raw and authentic, Kevin simply said, "That's the scene. That's what we need." They filmed it immediately, capturing Whitney's genuine emotion before she had time to overthink it. As daily footage began coming back from the set, the Warner Brothers executives, who had been so skeptical of Whitney's casting, started to realize they might be witnessing something unprecedented. The chemistry between Whitney and Kevin wasn't manufactured or forced. It was genuine, built on a foundation of mutual respect and Kevin's unwavering belief in Whitney's ability. Terry Semel, the studio president who had nearly shut down production before it started, visited the set in December during filming of the iconic "I Will Always Love You" performance scene. He watched as Whitney, now comfortable in front of the camera, delivered a vocal performance so powerful that crew members had tears in their eyes. After the take, Semel pulled Kevin aside and said something that Kevin would later cite as one of the most satisfying moments of his career. "You were right about her. She's not just good, she's extraordinary." But the real test wouldn't come until the film was released and audiences could judge whether Kevin's gamble had paid off. The Bodyguard was scheduled for a November 1992 release, less than a year after that disastrous first day of filming when Whitney had locked herself in her trailer, convinced she couldn't do it. The world premiere of The Bodyguard took place on November 23, 1992, at Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. Whitney arrived on the red carpet with a mixture of excitement and terror, knowing that within hours, critics and audiences would render their verdict on her acting debut. Kevin, arriving separately with his wife at the time, made a point of seeking Whitney out before the screening began, giving her that familiar shoulder squeeze one more time. As the lights dimmed and the film began, Whitney sat in the theater watching herself on screen for the first time in a completed film. She saw all her insecurities magnified 30 feet tall, every moment where she felt she wasn't good enough, every scene where she was convinced she'd failed. But she also saw something else. She saw the genuine emotion Kevin had helped her access. She saw the star power that she'd been too scared to acknowledge. And she saw a performance that, while not technically perfect, was undeniably authentic. The audience's reaction during that premiere screening told the story. They weren't watching a singer trying to act. They were watching Rachel Marin, a character so fully realized that it was impossible to separate the performance from the performer. When Whitney's character sang "I Will Always Love You" in the film's climactic concert scene, the theater audience began applauding, breaking the usual silence of a premiere screening. The Bodyguard went on to become one of the highest-grossing films of 1992, earning over $400 million worldwide. The soundtrack, driven by Whitney's iconic rendition of "I Will Always Love You," became the best-selling soundtrack album of all time, with over 45 million copies sold. Whitney's performance, while not nominated for major acting awards, was praised for its authenticity and star power. She had proven that Kevin's faith in her wasn't misplaced. But for both Kevin and Whitney, the real success of The Bodyguard wasn't measured in box office receipts or album sales. It was measured in what happened on that first day of filming, when a terrified singer locked herself in a trailer, and a patient director sat on the steps for 45 minutes refusing to give up on her. That moment of human connection, of one person believing in another when they couldn't believe in themselves, became the foundation for everything that followed. Years later in interviews, Whitney would always speak of Kevin with deep gratitude and affection. She credited him not just with giving her the role, but with teaching her that fear and capability could coexist. Kevin, for his part, maintained that casting Whitney was the easiest decision he ever made. The hard part, he said, was helping her see what he'd seen from the beginning, that she was more than good enough. She was extraordinary. When Whitney died in February 2012, Kevin Costner spoke at her funeral, and his words that day echoed the conversation they'd had 20 years earlier in that trailer on the Warner Brothers lot. He told the congregation about Whitney's fears, her doubts, and her absolute conviction that she wasn't good enough for the role that would define her acting career. And then he said something that brought the entire church to tears. "Whitney, you were good enough. You were always good enough. And I wish you could have believed that about yourself the way I believed it about you." The Bodyguard remains a testament to what happens when someone sees potential in us that we can't see in ourselves. It's a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept that we might be capable of more than we think. And it's proof that patience, faith, and a simple shoulder squeeze can change not just a movie, but a life. That first day on set, when Whitney Houston was convinced she would fail and Kevin Costner refused to let her, became more than just a moment in film production history. It became a story about the power of belief, the importance of patience, and the extraordinary things that can happen when we choose to trust in someone else's vision of who we can be. If this incredible story of mentorship, faith, and transformation moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to remember that fear doesn't mean you're not ready. It means you're about to do something important. Drop a comment about a time when someone believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself. And don't forget to like this video and check out our other stories about the moments that changed music and film history forever.